The fall of the Allies, a dystopian Europe, failed to turn the tide in the Allies' favor. Britain might have faced imminent collapse. The Royal Air Force's success in the Battle of Britain had been a significant deterrent to German plans for a full invasion. However, without the support of the United States, especially the supply of arms, war materials, and eventually soldiers, the British could have been overwhelmed. The fall of Britain would have been a devastating blow to the Allied cause. In a Europe controlled by Nazi Germany, the reign of terror would have intensified. The Holocaust, which saw the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews, would likely have been even more widespread, with other groups such as Slavs, Romani people, disabled individuals, and political dissidents being subjected to even harsher fates. The Nazis would have solidified their grip on the continent, imposing their brutal totalitarian vision on every occupied territory. The cultural, intellectual, and technological achievements of Europe would have been stifled under the weight of fascism. The Pacific Theater, a Japanese empire unchallenged. In the Pacific, the story would be equally grim. Japan's imperial ambitions in Asia were already ambitious and expansive by the time they attacked Pearl Harbor. Without a strong American military presence, it is likely that Japan would have consolidated its control over large portions of East Asia and the Pacific. Imagine a world where the United States never bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan would have continued its brutal occupation of China, Korea, and Southeast Asia. The so-called Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere would have been an unchallenged Japanese empire, a fascist juggernaut whose imperial rule would have likely persisted for decades. American resistance in the Pacific, including the vital naval victories at Midway, would have been absent, and the U.S. would not have had the resources or manpower to launch a successful counteroffensive. A global shift in power. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Without American intervention, the Axis powers would have undoubtedly taken control of the world's most strategic territories. Nazi Germany's drive eastward into the Soviet Union would have faced little opposition after Britain's fall. Stalin's Red Army, despite its resilience, would have been no match for a fully focused German war machine. With Germany in control of Europe and Japan ruling Asia, the entire global geopolitical map would have been drawn under the banners of fascism and totalitarianism. The Nazi-Soviet War, which historically resulted in heavy casualties and immense destruction, could have ended in Germany's victory, especially if the Wehrmacht was not fighting on multiple fronts. Once the Soviet Union was defeated, the Third Reich would likely have turned its attention to the rest of the world, potentially attempting to extend its influence into Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas. The Nazi ideology of racial superiority, Aryan purity, and imperial conquest would have become the dominant global political philosophy. The rise of white supremacy, combined with fascist militarism, could have led to an even darker and more authoritarian global order. The free world as we know it would have been consigned to history, replaced by a dystopian nightmare of oppression. The United States, isolation or collapse. The United States, without its military triumph in World War II, would have faced a very different post-war landscape. The nation's role as the preeminent global power was secured by its military victories and the subsequent rebuilding of Europe and Japan through programs like the Marshall Plan. Without these achievements, America's place in the world would have been severely diminished. The defeat of the Allies might have led America turning inward, retreating into isolationism once more. The trauma of losing such a cataclysmic war could have fueled deep political divisions, fracturing the nation at home. The American dream, the ideal of prosperity, freedom, and democracy could have been severely undermined by the sense of national failure. the United States might have faced a long period of recovery, perhaps even internal collapse, as it struggled with economic hardships, political instability, and a loss of global influence. The Cold War, which emerged after the war, would have never taken place in this reality. The US and the Soviet Union would not have been able to challenge each other for global dominance. Instead, a new balance of power would have emerged, with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan at the helm. These fascist powers might have maintained a delicate balance of terror and control, but without the competition from the United States and the Soviet Union, global conflicts could have taken a far darker turn.
The emergence of resistance, a world of rebellion. Even in such a grim world, the human spirit might have found a way to resist. Just as there were pockets of resistance during the Nazi occupation of Europe, there could have been underground movements in the territories controlled by Axis powers. Revolutionary groups made up of former soldiers, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens might have fought to overthrow the fascist regimes, seeking to restore democracy, freedom, and justice. But the struggle would have been fierce and victory uncertain. In the shadow of powerful and ruthless empires, any uprising would have been met with severe retaliation. The world would have been divided between those who chose to submit to tyranny and those who risked everything for the chance of liberation. This resistance would have had no real power base, no superpower to support it, and no clear path to success. The legacy of a lost victory. How history would have changed forever. If the United States had lost World War II, the implications would have echoed through history, reshaping every aspect of our modern world. The triumph of democracy, the rise of human rights, and the spread of capitalism would have been stunted in their tracks. The institutions that arose from the war, such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, would likely never have come into existence, leaving the world to navigate its post-war future without these stabilizing structures. The cultural dominance of the United States, Hollywood, music, literature, and technology would have never flourished in the way it did. Without the prosperity of the post-war economy and the global leadership role, American soft power would have been limited, and other global centers of influence, such as Berlin or Tokyo, might have emerged instead. Conclusion: a world that could have been. The United States' victory in World War II was not just a military success, it was a pivotal moment that shaped the modern world. If the US had lost, the world we live in today would be unrecognizable. Fascism might have prevailed, democracy could have been crushed, and the balance of global power would have been irrevocably altered. The United States, as we know it, might have faded into obscurity, its dreams of freedom and prosperity buried under the boots of oppressive regimes. Such a world serves as a stark reminder of how fragile our reality can be, and how close we came to a very different future. It is a world we can only imagine, a world where the United States did not win the war, but one where the legacy of that loss would forever haunt the pages of history. Subscribe for more video, like and share. Thanks for watching.